What would you do if you saw a billionaire's son bringing your co-worker to tears? For Clara Evans, a 24-year-old waitress with crippling student debt and a dream of being an architect, the answer was simple. You do the right thing. But the right thing got her face to face with one of the most powerful families in New York City. She was told she'd never work in this town again. She expected to be fired, to be ruined. She never expected the boy's father to show up. And she certainly never expected him to arrive with an offer that would change her life. Starting with a question: how would you like to see the city from my helicopter? This isn't a fairy tale. It's a story about what happens when unbreakable integrity meets untouchable power. Aria Ristorante wasn't just a restaurant. It was a stage. Perched 60 floors above Central Park, its floor-to-ceiling windows presented a living tapestry of New York City, a glittering reward for those who could afford the view. The air inside hummed with the quiet confidence of old money and the boisterous laughter of the newly minted. It smelled of truffle oil, vintage Barolo, and ambition. For Clara Evans, it was a beautifully constructed cage where she served people living the life she spent her nights sketching in a cramped Brooklyn apartment. Clara wasn't just a waitress. That was the what, not the who. Who she was an architect in waiting. Her mind worked in lines, angles, and load-bearing structures. She saw the stress points in the grand arch of the dining room and mentally redesigned the inefficient layout of the bar. She was 2 semesters away from her master's at Pratt Institute, a dream funded by this very job, and a mountain of student loans that felt as tall as the skyscraper she worked in. Every night she donned the crisp black uniform, a stark contrast to her vibrant creative spirit. She moved with an efficiency that bordered on grace, her memory for orders and faces impeccable. She could debone a branzino tableside with the precision of a surgeon and discuss the tasting notes of a $5,000 bottle of Chateau Margaux she'd never be able to afford a single glass of. She was good at her job because she was a professional, but a part of her always felt like an observer, a ghost gliding through the celebrations of others. Tonight, a Tuesday, was different. A palpable tension had settled over the staff during the pre-shift briefing. Mr. Dubois, the restaurant manager, a man whose posture was permanently stiffened by years of placating the wealthy, had announced the arrival of the sterling party. Table 12, the window seat, he'd said, his voice low. Preston Sterling III, you all know the protocol. Nothing is too much trouble. Whatever he wants, he gets. No mistakes. Maya, you'll be assisting Clara tonight. Just follow her lead. Maya, a doe-eyed 19-year-old from Ohio, in her first week nodded nervously, her hands trembling slightly as she polished already gleaming silverware. Clara gave her a reassuring smile, but she felt a familiar knot tighten in her stomach. Preston Sterling III wasn't just a guest. He was a walking liability. He was the 26-year-old heir to the Sterling Enterprises fortune, a real estate empire whose name was branded on half the skyline visible from their window. He was infamous for his arrogance, his wandering hands, and a sneering contempt for anyone he deemed beneath him, which was practically everyone. The party arrived like a minor weather system, loud and disruptive. Preston led the way, his custom-tailored Tom Ford suit, straining slightly at the shoulders. He was flanked by 2 sycophantic friends and 3 women who looked more like accessories than companions. His face was a mask of bored entitlement, his eyes scanning the room, not with appreciation, but with assessment, as if trying to calculate its net worth. The corner table, My usual, he snapped, not at the hostess but into the air around her. And get us 3 bottles of the 09 Dom Perignon. Don't bother with the menu. We'll tell the girl what we want. Clara watched from her station, her expression neutral. She'd dealt with his kind before. The trick was to become invisible, a polite and efficient automaton. Be a pair of hands that refilled glasses, a voice that recited specials, nothing more. Human interaction was a variable, and with men like Preston Sterling it was a dangerous one. "Ready?" she whispered to Maya, who looked like she was about to face a firing squad. "I think so," Maya squeaked. "Just stay close. Refill water-clear plates when I nod. Don't speak to him unless he speaks to you, and if you feel uncomfortable, find an excuse to go to the kitchen." "Got it." Maya nodded, her gratitude evident. Clara took a deep breath, pasted on her professional smile, and stepped forward. "Good evening, Mr. Sterling. Welcome back to Aria. I'm Clara, and I'll be your server this evening." Preston didn't even look at her. He was busy showing one of his friends a video on his phone, laughing obnoxiously. He simply waved a dismissive hand in her direction. "The champagne now." The knot in Clara's stomach tightened. It was going to be a long night. She had no idea it would be the night that would shatter her carefully constructed world, and then inexplicably rebuild it into something she could have never imagined. The first hour was a masterclass in calculated degradation. Preston Sterling III treated the act of being served not as a service, but as a performance for his amusement. He snapped his fingers to get attention, a sound that cut through the sophisticated murmur of the dining room like a whip crack. He sent back a perfectly cooked steak, claiming it was psychologically undercooked, only to demand the exact same dish 5 minutes later. He made loud, disparaging comments about the other diners, his voice a privileged sledgehammer in a room of crystal flutes. Clara handled it all with a placid, unshakable calm. She was a stone wall against his tide of petulance. Her voice never wavered, her smile never faltered. She anticipated his needs, deflected his snide remarks with polite non-answers, and kept his champagne flute perpetually full, hoping the alcohol might sedate him. It did the opposite. Maya was the new target. As the night wore on, Preston's attention, venomous and predatory, shifted to the younger, more vulnerable waitress. He started with small things. When Maya reached across the table to refill a water glass, he would deliberately move his hand into her path, forcing her to awkwardly maneuver around him. He began calling her Ohio, his voice dripping with condescension. "Hey, Ohio, another bottle? And try not to spill it this time, your hands are shaking." "Nervous," he sneered, eliciting snickers from his friends. Clara saw Maya's cheeks flush with shame. She tried to intervene subtly, taking over tasks that would put Maya in direct proximity to Preston. "I'll get that champagne, Mr. Sterling," she'd say, stepping smoothly between them. But Preston was enjoying the game. He saw Clara's protectiveness and decided to break through it. The true flashpoint came during the dessert course. Maya was clearing away the main course plates, her movements careful and deliberate. As she reached for Preston's plate, he leaned back in his chair, intentionally blocking her. "You know," he said, his voice loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear, "I bet a girl like you has never even seen a watch like this." He thrust his wrist forward, displaying a Patek Philippe Nautilus that cost more than Clara's entire tuition. "Go on, take a look. Don't touch it, though. You probably have grease on your fingers." Maya froze her face, a mask of humiliation. She mumbled a quiet, "It's very nice, sir," and tried to grab the plate. As she did, Preston's hand shot out and clamped around her wrist. It wasn't a gentle touch. It was an act of ownership. "Hey, I'm talking to you. Look me in the eye when I talk to you, Ohio." Maya gasped a small, frightened sound. She tried to pull her arm back, but his grip was firm. The clatter of cutlery on the plate she was holding echoed in the suddenly quiet space around their table. Tears welled in her eyes. From across the table, Clara saw it all. It was as if time slowed down. She saw the fear on Maya's face, the cruel smirk on Preston's, the uncomfortable shifting of his friends, who were complicit in their silence. She saw Mr. Dubois hovering near the maitre d's stand, his eyes wide with panic, but his feet rooted to the spot. A man paralyzed by the conflict between his duty to his staff and his fear of a powerful client. In that instant, something inside Clara snapped. It was the architect in her, the part that understood structure and integrity. She saw a foundation of basic human decency being bulldozed by arrogant power, and she could not let it stand. The careful wall of professional detachment she had built around herself crumbled into dust. She put down the silver tray of dessert spoons she was holding, the soft clink barely audible. She took 2 deliberate steps forward, her posture straight. Her gaze locked on Preston Sterling's hand around Maya's wrist. Her voice, when it came out, was not loud, but it was clear and cold as ice, cutting through the tension with the sharpness of a diamond. "Sir," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Let her go. Now!" The entire table fell silent. Preston Sterling III, who hadn't been told no in a meaningful way since he was a toddler, slowly turned his head to face Clara. He looked at her as if she were a piece of talking furniture. A slow, incredulous smirk spread across his face. He didn't release Maya's wrist. "I'm sorry," he said, feigning confusion. "What did you just say to me?" "I said," Clara repeated, taking another step closer, her eyes boring into his, "let her go." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. The sheer, unadulterated force of her will filled the space around them. His friends stopped laughing. The women at his table looked down at their plates, suddenly fascinated by their own manicures. Maya stood frozen, a deer in the headlights, the tears now silently streaming down her face. Preston's smirk faltered, replaced by a flash of genuine anger. He was being challenged publicly by a waitress. He squeezed Maya's wrist tighter, a petty display of power. "Or what? What are you going to do about it? Sweetheart?" That was the last straw. Clara's professional training was gone, replaced by a cold, righteous fury. She looked past Preston, her eyes finding Mr. Dubois, who was now moving hesitantly towards the table. She gave him a look that was both a plea and a command. Then she turned back to Preston. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice now dangerously low, "you are creating a hostile environment for my colleague. You have physically assaulted a member of my staff. I am asking you one final time to release her and conduct yourself with a minimum of human decency. If you cannot, I will be forced to ask you to leave." The words hung in the air, stunning in their audacity. A waitress was threatening to kick out Preston Sterling III. The concept was so foreign, so utterly outside the realm of his experience, that he actually laughed. A harsh, barking sound. "Ask me to leave," he spat, finally letting go of Maya's wrist with a shove. "You can't be serious. Do you have any idea who I am?" "Who my father is. My father owns the building this pathetic little restaurant is in. I could have you fired with a single phone call. I could buy this entire place and turn it into my personal toilet if I wanted to. I don't care if your father is the King of England." Clara shot back, her voice ringing with conviction. "In this restaurant right now, you are a guest who is harassing an employee, and that will not happen on my watch." She turned to Maya, her expression softening instantly. "Maya, go to the staff room. It's okay. I'll handle this." Maya, still trembling, practically fled from the table. Preston was now on his feet, his face red with fury. He was inches from Clara, trying to use his height to intimidate her. She didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. "You're fired," he seethed. "You are so unbelievably fired." "You don't have the authority to fire me," Clara said calmly. "Oh no." He spun around to face Mr. Dubois, who had finally arrived at the table. "Dubois, fire her. Fire this insolent little witch right now, or I swear to God I will call my father and have his legal team gut this entire establishment by morning." Mr. Dubois looked wretched. He looked from Preston's furious face to Clara's defiant one. He was a man caught in an impossible position. His entire career had been built on the principle of the customer is always right, especially when that customer's name was Sterling. But he also saw the other staff members, watching their faces a mixture of fear and hope. He saw the surrounding tables, all pretending not to listen, their dinners forgotten. He knew this was a moment that would define him and the restaurant for years to come. He took a deep, shaky breath. "Mr. Sterling," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "Perhaps if we could just calm down." "Calm down," Preston roared. "I will not calm down. Fire her, or I walk." Clara watched Mr. Dubois's internal battle. She expected him to fold. She was already mentally composing her resignation, calculating how many shifts she'd need to pick up at some diner in Queens to make rent. But then something shifted in the manager's eyes. Maybe it was Clara's courage. Maybe it was the ugliness of Preston's behavior. Or maybe just for once he decided that a person's dignity was worth more than a rich man's bill. Mr. Dubois straightened his shoulders, and the tremble in his voice vanished. "No, Mr. Sterling," he said, his tone firm. Preston stared at him dumbfounded. "No, no. I will not fire Ms. Evans for defending her colleague from your unacceptable behavior," Mr. Dubois stated. He glanced at Clara with newfound respect. "In fact, I'm with her. Your conduct has been inappropriate all evening. I think it's best if you and your party settle your bill and leave." For a moment, Preston Sterling III looked as if he'd been slapped. He was utterly speechless. He looked at his friends who were avoiding his gaze. He looked at the other diners. He was being publicly humiliated. His face contorted into a mask of pure venom. He reached into his wallet, pulled out a thick wad of $100 bills, and threw them on the table. "Keep the change. You're going to need it for your severance package." He then pointed a trembling finger at Clara. "You, I will not forget this. You have just made the biggest mistake of your life. You'll be lucky if you can get a job scrubbing floors in the subway after I'm done with you." With that, he stormed out of the restaurant, his entourage scrambling to follow him. The dining room was left in a stunned, profound silence. Every eye was on Clara Evans, the waitress who had just stared down a titan and won. She stood her ground, her heart hammering against her ribs, the adrenaline making her feel both invincible and terrifyingly vulnerable. She had done the right thing. But as she looked out the window at the glittering city, all she could think about was Preston's threat and the chilling certainty that the consequences were just beginning. The next 24 hours were the quietest, most terrifying of Clara's life. The immediate aftermath of the incident had been a blur. Mr. Dubois, looking both shaken and strangely invigorated, had simply nodded at her and said, "Go home, Clara. Get some rest. We'll deal with this tomorrow." The staff had gathered around her, their hushed words of support and awe, a temporary balm on her frayed nerves. Maya had hugged her, crying with gratitude, and whispered, "No one has ever stood up for me like that before." But as Clara rode the pre-dawn subway back to her tiny Brooklyn apartment, the adrenaline faded, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. Preston Sterling's final words echoed in her mind. "You'll be lucky if you can get a job scrubbing floors in the subway after I'm done with you." It wasn't just the threat of being fired from Aria. It was the chilling implication that the Sterling name had the power to blacklist her from every corner of the city. She didn't sleep. Instead, she sat at her drafting table, the half-finished blueprints for a community library, staring back at her, mocking her. Her dream of building beautiful, functional spaces for people felt impossibly distant. How could she build anything if she couldn't even pay her rent? She thought of her mother in upstate New York, whose mounting medical bills were a constant low-grade hum of anxiety in the back of her mind. This job wasn't just for her. It was for her mother's security. Had her single act of defiance put all of that in jeopardy? When she arrived for her shift the next evening, the atmosphere at Aria was thick with unspoken tension. The staff treated her with a new kind of reverence, mixed with fear, as if she were a martyr about to be canonized. Mr. Dubois was nowhere to be seen. The maitre d' simply told her to wait in the manager's office. The office was small and windowless, a stark contrast to the opulence of the dining room. Clara sat on a stiff chair, her hands clasped in her lap, her waitress uniform feeling like a costume for a role she was about to be fired from. She stared at a framed photo on the wall, the restaurant's grand opening with Mr. Dubois, shaking hands with a man she now recognized from society. Pages Arthur Sterling, the patriarch, the builder, the father. The door opened, and Mr. Dubois entered. He looked 10 years older than he had the night before. His face was pale, and he didn't meet her eyes. "Clara," he said, sinking into his chair with a heavy sigh. "Thank you for coming in." "Am I being fired?" she asked, her voice steady. She had decided on the subway ride over that she would face this with the same dignity she had shown Preston. Mr. Dubois finally looked at her, his expression pained. "I don't know," he admitted, and the uncertainty was somehow worse than a simple yes. "I received a call this morning, not from Preston, but from Arthur Sterling's executive assistant. The call was brief. I was informed that Mr. Sterling himself is aware of the incident." Clara's blood ran cold. This was so much worse than his spoiled son. Arthur Sterling was a legend in New York real estate. He was a ruthless but respected figure who had built his empire from the ground up. He was known for his brilliant mind and his icy pragmatism. He would not be driven by a bruised ego like his son. He would be driven by business, by liability, by the bottom line. And a waitress who publicly ejected his heir was a very big liability. "He knows my name," Clara whispered. "He knows everything," Mr. Dubois said grimly. "The Sterling Corporation's legal department requested copies of our security footage and a written report of the event which I provided. I was truthful, Clara. I detailed Preston's behavior and commended your professionalism and courage." He paused, rubbing his temples. "I don't know if it will make any difference. They are not just our patrons, Clara. As Preston so loudly reminded us, Sterling Enterprises is our landlord. They hold the lease on this entire floor. They could ruin us without breaking a sweat." The weight of that statement settled in the small office, suffocating the air. Clara realized the true scope of her actions. She hadn't just put her own job at risk. She had potentially jeopardized the livelihoods of everyone at Aria. A wave of guilt washed over her. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Dubois," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "No," he said, shaking his head. "You have nothing to be sorry for. You did what I should have done 5 years ago. Whatever happens, you should know that." But he trailed off, looking towards the door, as if expecting a legion of lawyers to burst through. "I was told to carry on as normal, but that there would be a resolution by the end of the week. It feels like waiting for a hurricane." Clara was dismissed, but told to stay on the floor just in case. She went through the motions of her work, her mind a whirlwind of anxiety. Every time the elevator doors chimed, her heart leaped into her throat. She looked out the window at the Sterling Tower, a monolithic blade of glass and steel piercing the clouds, and felt impossibly small. Around 9 p.m., as the evening service was in full swing, it happened. The head hostess approached Clara, her face ashen. "Clara," she said in a hushed, urgent whisper. "He's here." "Preston?" Clara asked, her stomach clenching. The hostess shook her head, her eyes wide with something that looked like awe and terror. "No," she breathed. "His father. Arthur Sterling is at the host stand, and he's asking for you." Time seemed to stop. The clatter of the kitchen, the murmur of diners, the distant city sirens. It all faded into a dull roar in Clara's ears. Arthur Sterling. Here. Now. It was the hurricane making landfall. She smoothed down her apron with trembling hands, a futile gesture of composure. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide in the kitchen, to disappear. But she had come this far. She would see it through. Taking a deep breath, she walked out of the main dining area and towards the restaurant's entrance. And there he was. He was not what she expected. Where his son was loud, soft, and ostentatious, Arthur Sterling was the epitome of quiet, formidable power. He was in his late 60s, with a shock of silver hair, a face that looked like it was carved from granite, and eyes that were a startlingly sharp blue. They were the eyes of a builder, a man who didn't just look at things, but assessed them, seeing their strengths, their weaknesses, their very foundations. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal grey suit by Zegna, a simple dark tie, and no jewelry, save for a plain classic wristwatch. He wasn't surrounded by an entourage. He stood alone, a pillar of immense gravity that seemed to bend the room around him. He wasn't looking at the decor or the view. He was looking directly at her as she approached. "Ms. Evans?" he asked. His voice was a low baritone, calm and measured, yet it carried an authority that his son's shouting could never achieve. "Yes, Mr. Sterling," Clara replied, amazed that her own voice came out as a steady whisper. "I am Arthur Sterling. I believe you've had the displeasure of meeting my son." It wasn't an apology, just a statement of fact. His expression was unreadable. "I would like a moment of your time. Is there somewhere we can speak privately?" Mr. Dubois, who had materialized beside them, immediately offered his office. Arthur Sterling gave a curt nod. As he walked past, a subtle, clean scent of cedar and leather followed him. He moved with the unhurried confidence of a man who has never once in his life had to rush. The staff parted before him, like the Red Sea. Back in the suffocatingly small office, Arthur Sterling declined the chair Mr. Dubois offered. He preferred to stand. He waited until the manager had nervously excused himself, closing the door behind him before he spoke. Clara remained standing as well, her back straight, her hands clasped behind her back. It felt like a military tribunal. "I have read Mr. Dubois' report," Arthur began, his sharp eyes fixed on her. "And I have watched the security footage from last night, all of it, from the moment my son arrived to the moment he left." Clara's heart pounded. The footage. He had seen everything. The snapping fingers, the leering, the wrist grab. Her intervention. "The footage is silent," he continued, his tone analytical. "It shows only actions. I want to hear the words. I want you to tell me in your own words exactly what happened. Do not embellish, and do not omit anything out of fear or misplaced courtesy. I want the truth." This was the test. She knew it. He wanted to see if she would shrink, if she would soften the story to save herself. She thought of Maya's terrified face, and her resolve hardened. She would give him the truth. Looking him directly in the eye, she recounted the entire event. She used clinical, precise language. She reported Preston's comments, his tone of voice, his insults. She described how he had targeted Maya. She repeated the conversation at the table verbatim, including her own words and his threats. She laid the facts out bare and unadorned like bricks in a wall. She didn't let her voice tremble, didn't inject emotion. She simply presented the evidence. Arthur Sterling listened without interruption. His expression never changed. He was a statue, a judge absorbing testimony. When she finished, the silence in the room was absolute. Clara held her breath, waiting for the verdict. He was quiet for a long time, his gaze distant, as if looking at something far beyond the office walls. When he finally spoke again, his voice was different, softer, tinged with something that sounded like profound disappointment, but not with her. "My son," he said, more to himself than to Clara, "has all of my advantages and none of my character. I built this company, Ms. Evans, with my bare hands and a loan I couldn't afford. I laid bricks in the summer heat and drew plans by candlelight. I learned that you judge a person not by their title or their bank account, but by how they treat those who can do nothing for them. It is a lesson my son has failed to learn, despite my best efforts." He finally looked back at her, and for the first time she saw something other than cold analysis in his eyes. It was respect. "Last night, Preston called me incandescent with rage," Arthur said. "He demanded I ruin you. He told me you were a disrespectful, arrogant nobody who needed to be taught a lesson about her place in the world." He paused, letting the words sink in. "He inadvertently taught me a lesson instead. He showed me that the heir to my empire, the boy I intended to one day hand everything over to, has the backbone of a jellyfish." Clara stood in stunned silence. This was not the conversation she had anticipated. "You, on the other hand," Arthur Sterling continued, taking a step closer. "You showed integrity. You showed courage. You defended someone weaker than you at great personal risk. You stood up to a name that makes most of this city tremble, all for a 19-year-old girl who earns minimum wage." He stopped directly in front of her. "That Ms. Evans is not the mark of a nobody. That is the mark of a leader." Clara felt a dizzying sense of disbelief. Her entire world was tilting on its axis. "I didn't come here tonight to get you fired, Ms. Evans," Arthur Sterling said, his voice dropping to a confidential tone. "I came here to offer you a job." The words "offer you a job" echoed in the small, windowless office. Clara stared at Arthur Sterling, certain she had misheard him. A job after what happened? It made no sense. Her mind, which had been braced for impact, was now struggling to process this complete reversal of expectation. A job? she managed to say, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes," he replied, his expression serious. "But not here. You're wasted in this restaurant, Miss Evans. Your talents are being squandered. I had my office do a little research on you after I saw the footage. Clara Evans, top of your class at Pratt Institute Master's Program in Architecture. Recipient of the Dean's List for 4 consecutive semesters. Your professors describe you as brilliant, innovative, and possessing a rare understanding of both form and function. It seems you build things, Miss Evans, just like I do." Clara was speechless. He knew about her studies. He knew about her dreams. In the space of less than a day, this powerful, enigmatic man had peeled back the layers of her life, looking past the waitress uniform, to see the architect she was striving to be. "My company, Sterling Enterprises," he continued, "has one of the most respected architectural and urban design divisions in the world. We don't just build skyscrapers. We build communities, parks, public spaces. We shape the very fabric of the city. But a company like a building is only as strong as its foundation, and its foundation is its people. Lately I've found our foundation is becoming complacent, full of people who say yes because it's easy, not because it's right. Full of men like my son." He paused, his gaze intense. "I need people with a backbone. People with a moral compass that doesn't bend regardless of the pressure. I need people who understand that integrity is the ultimate cornerstone of any lasting structure. I saw that in you last night. That is a quality I can't teach, and it's a quality I desperately need." Clara's head was spinning. From the terror of imminent ruin to this unbelievable proposition. It was too much, too fast. I don't know what to say," she stammered. Arthur Sterling's stern expression softened into something that almost resembled a smile. "Don't say anything yet. An offer like this shouldn't be accepted in a cramped, stressful office. It should be accepted with perspective." He glanced at his watch. "I find that true perspective is best achieved from a higher altitude. You've spent months serving people who look down on this city from 60 floors up. I'd like to offer you a different view." He looked at her, a challenge in his eyes. "My helicopter is on the roof of the Sterling Tower across the street. It's waiting. I want to show you what you're capable of building. I want to show you the city not as a series of streets you have to navigate, but as a canvas waiting for your touch." A helicopter. The offer was so outlandish, so dramatic, so utterly cinematic, that Clara almost laughed. It was absurd. It was insane. It was also the single most incredible thing anyone had ever said to her. She thought of her cramped apartment, her looming student debt, her mother's worried phone calls. She thought of the condescending smirks of men like Preston Sterling who saw her as nothing more than a servant. And then she thought of the sky. A new kind of resolve, not of defiance, but of ambition, surged through her. This was a turning point, a door opening into a world she had only ever dreamed of sketching on paper. "Okay," she said, her voice clear and steady. "Yes, let's go." A genuine smile touched Arthur Sterling's lips. "Excellent. There's just one thing." He gestured to her black and white uniform. "You won't be needing that anymore." With a sense of surreal ceremony, Clara reached back and untied her apron. The apron she had worn for years, the symbol of her servitude, her struggle, and her quiet observation. She folded it neatly and placed it on Mr. Dubois's desk. It felt like shedding a skin. She walked out of the office, leaving her old life behind on that desk. Arthur Sterling held the door for her. As they walked through the now silent restaurant, The staff and diners watched in stunned disbelief as the waitress and the billionaire tycoon walked out together not as adversaries, but as something new entirely. Something that looked impossibly like allies. They didn't look back. They were heading for the sky. The transition from the hushed, climate-controlled world of Aria Ristorante to the living, breathing chaos of a Manhattan street was jarring. The air thick with the scents of roasted nuts, exhaust fumes, and the faint perfume of 1,000 passers-by felt more real than anything Clara had experienced all night. People swirled around them, a river of anonymous faces, each person wrapped in their own drama, oblivious to the tectonic shift that had just occurred in Clara's life. She walked beside Arthur Sterling, a bubble of surreal silence enclosing them amidst the urban symphony. Her simple black work slacks and white blouse felt flimsy, inadequate armor for the new reality she was stepping into. "Are you all right, Miss Evans?" Arthur asked, his voice a calm anchor in the storm of her thoughts. He navigated the crowded sidewalk with an effortless authority, people seeming to part for him subconsciously. I think so," Clara replied, her voice breathy. "It's just a lot to process." The most significant moments in life often arrive without an invitation. He said, not with condescension, but with the quiet wisdom of a man who had weathered many such moments. They don't ask if you're ready. They simply demand you rise to meet them. They arrived at the entrance to the Sterling Tower. It wasn't just a building. It was a statement. A sheer cliff of dark glass and polished steel that seemed to scrape the stars from the night sky. The name Sterling was carved into the granite archway in clean, powerful letters. Two imposing security guards in sharp black uniforms nodded respectfully at Arthur, pulling open the massive glass doors. The lobby was a cathedral of commerce. The ceilings soared 100 feet high, clad in white Italian marble, veined with silver. A colossal abstract sculpture that Clara recognized as a Richard Serra twisted in the center of the cavernous space, its rusted steel a warm, organic contrast to the lobby's cold perfection. The air was still and cool, smelling faintly of ozone and money. The silence was profound, broken only by the soft echo of their footsteps on the polished floor. Clara, in her simple server's clothes, felt the full weight of the Sterling Empire. She should have felt like an intruder, a mouse in a lion's den. But strangely, a different feeling began to surface. Looking up at the clean lines, the perfect geometry, the interplay of light and shadow, she didn't feel intimidated. She felt inspired. The architect in her was captivated, analyzing the structural audacity and the aesthetic grace of the space. Arthur seemed to notice the direction of her gaze. "My first major project," he said quietly, as they approached a private, unmarked elevator bank. The critics called it a monument to ego. I called it a declaration of intent. A building should make you feel something. It should force you to look up. He swiped a keycard, and a set of brushed steel doors slid open silently. The elevator car was paneled in dark, rich mahogany, the air warm and smelling of leather. It was intimate and enclosed after the vastness of the lobby. As the doors closed, sealing them in, Arthur didn't press a button. He simply looked at her. "Before we go up, I want to ask you something, Clara," he said, using her first name. For the first time, it felt both personal and momentous. Those blueprints in your apartment, the ones for the community library. What is the most important room in that design? Clara was stunned. He knew about the library plans. Her personal project, the one she poured her soul into after her exhausting shifts. The level of detail in his background check was astonishing, bordering on unnerving. She took a breath, her mind racing past the shock to the heart of his question. It wasn't small talk, it was another test. The children's reading room, she answered without hesitation. It has a south-facing wall, made almost entirely of glass, looking onto a small garden. The idea is that light is the most fundamental nutrient for growth, both for the plants outside and the minds within. Everything else in the building is designed to support that one space. A slow, deep smile of genuine approval spread across Arthur Sterling's face. "Exactly," he said, as if she had just confirmed a fundamental law of the universe. He then pressed the top button on the panel, simply marked with a star. The elevator began to ascend so fast and smooth that Clara felt a strange sensation of weightlessness, as if the ground itself was falling away from her. The doors opened onto a different world. The wind hit them first, a powerful sustained gust that carried the sound of the city muted and transformed into a distant roar. They were on the roof, a flat, dark expanse under the infinite bowl of the night sky. In the center sat the helicopter, a dormant black insect of immense power and grace. The city lights spread out in every direction, a breathtaking, impossible tapestry of human creation. The sheer scale of it, the raw vertigo of standing on the edge of the world, made her gasp. "I come up here when I need to think," Arthur said, his voice raised slightly against the wind. He walked towards the edge of the helipad, his suit jacket flapping behind him. He was utterly unafraid. "Down there, you're in the weeds. You worry about permits, budgets, traffic politics. You see the problems. Up here," he swept his arm across the panorama. "You don't see the problems. You see the pattern, the system, the design. You see the dream of it all laid bare." He turned to face her, the city lights framing him like a halo. "A restaurant is a bad place to make a life-altering decision. Too much noise. Too many distractions. Up here, it's just you, the sky, and the truth. So let's try this again." A pilot emerged from the helicopter's cockpit and opened the passenger door. Arthur gestured for her to get in. The cabin was a revelation of quiet luxury. The scent of supple leather filled the air. The seats were plush and deep, the windows large and panoramic. It was the inner sanctum of a world she had only ever served from the outside. As they buckled themselves in and put on headsets, the world outside the window disappeared, replaced by the intimate peace of the cockpit. The pilot gave a thumbs up, and the rotors began to spin. The sound started as a low whoomp, whoomp, growing steadily into a deafening percussive roar that vibrated through Clara's entire body. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated power. She watched as the city lights began to tremble, and then with a lurch that sent her stomach into her throat. They were airborne. The sensation was terrifying and exhilarating. They were untethered, floating, rising above the tower that had once seemed impossibly tall. Clara pressed her face to the cold glass of the window, her mind struggling to comprehend the vision before her. The city she had known her whole life. The city of crowded subways, rude pedestrians, and relentless hustle transformed into a thing of breathtaking beauty. It was a living blueprint, a glittering circuit board pulsing with life. She saw the elegant curve of the Brooklyn Bridge, the rigid geometry of Midtown, the dark rectangular heart of Central Park. Her architect's eye took over, tracing the flow of traffic, the clusters of light and shadow, seeing the city not as a place but as a creation. Incredible, isn't it? Arthur's voice came through her headset, calm and clear amidst the roar of the engines. The ultimate expression of human ambition. The helicopter banked flying south along the Hudson River. The Statue of Liberty, illuminated and proud, stood sentinel in the harbor. Down there, Arthur pointed to a dark, sprawling patch of land on the west side, a black hole in the glittering grid. That is the Hudson Yards West Development Site. Our next great project. Or our next great failure. He leaned forward slightly, his tone shifting from philosophical to pragmatic. The city wants a landmark. The community wants a home. My board of directors wants a return on investment. And my son. He said the word with a trace of bitterness, drew up a plan for a set of sterile glass towers, a private club, and a luxury shopping mall that would effectively wall off the existing neighborhood. It was a monument to greed. I tore it up this morning after I spoke to Mr. Dubois. He looked at her, his blue eyes sharp and intense, even in the dim light of the cabin. That project needs a soul, Clara. It needs a heart. The current team is composed of brilliant, experienced, and utterly uninspired architects who have forgotten how to design for human beings. They know how to build, but they've forgotten why. This was it. The true offer laid bare 60 stories above the city. I am formally offering you a position as lead creative consultant on the Hudson Yards West project. You will bypass the entire departmental hierarchy and report directly to me. I will see to it that your student loans from Pratt are paid in full by the end of this week. Your starting salary will be triple what you would make as a junior architect at any other firm in this city. You will be given a budget, a team, and a seat at the most important table in my company. He paused, letting the immensity of the offer sink in. Your only mandate is to design something that matters, something that serves the city, not just its wealthiest inhabitants. I don't want your resume, Clara. I want your conscience. I want that vision you have for the children's reading room, but on the scale of a city block. Clara felt the tears before she was even aware she was crying. They weren't tears of sadness or fear. They were tears of pure, overwhelming catharsis. A dam of anxiety of years of scrimping and saving of sleepless nights, spent hunched over a drafting table of enduring the casual cruelty of men like Preston Sterling. It all broke. The emotion was so powerful it was a physical force, leaving her breathless. Why she finally managed to ask, her voice choked and raw in the headset. She turned from the window to face him. I'm a waitress. I haven't even graduated yet. There are hundreds of architects more qualified than I am. Why me? Arthur Sterling looked out at the city, at the endless towers that bore his name, his legacy written in steel and glass across the sky. 45 years ago, he began his voice softer, more personal than she had ever heard it. I was a 22-year-old kid from Queens with a degree in structural engineering and a hole in my shoe. I was working for a brutal, dismissive man named Sal Romano. One day, on a construction site, I saw Sal trying to force his crew to use substandard steel beams to cut costs on a small apartment building. I knew it was dangerous. I knew it was wrong. Everyone else was too scared to speak up. I was terrified. But I spoke up. Sal fired me on the spot in front of everyone. He told me I'd be lucky to get a job mixing cement for the rest of my life. He looked back at Clara, and in his eyes she saw the ghost of that scared 22-year-old boy. But the developer, an old man named Ben Jacobs, had overheard the entire thing. He walked over, looked me up and down, and said, "Any kid with the guts to trade his job for a pile of bricks has the kind of foundation I build on." He hired me the next day. He mentored me. He gave me my first loan. Ben Jacobs didn't invest in my degree, Clara. He invested in my character. The helicopter began a slow, graceful turn heading back towards the heart of the city. I have spent the last 30 years looking for someone with that same foundation. I've looked for it in my own son and failed to find it. Then last night, I watched a security video, and I saw a young woman trade her job, her security, everything for the dignity of a teenage girl she barely knew. I saw you stand up to my family name when you thought it would ruin you. I'm not hiring the waitress Clara, and I'm not just hiring the architect. I am investing in your character. He smiled, a true warm smile that transformed his stern face. So what do you say? Are you ready to stop serving the people who live in these towers and start building them instead? Clara wiped the tears from her cheeks with the back of her hand. She looked out the window, but she wasn't just seeing a pattern of lights anymore. She was seeing possibilities. She saw parks where there were parking lots, homes where there were warehouses, and a beautiful sunlit library right in the heart of it all. The fear and doubt had been incinerated in the roar of the helicopter's engines, replaced by a powerful, blazing certainty. She looked at Arthur Sterling, the man who had seen her when she was invisible, and gave him her answer. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and strong, ringing with the promise of a future she was finally ready to build. "Yes, I am." Clara Evans's story is a powerful reminder that your circumstances don't define your character, but your character can absolutely change your circumstances. She walked into that restaurant as a waitress, but she walked out as an architect, not because of a lucky break, but because in a moment that mattered, she chose integrity over obedience. She chose courage over fear. Arthur Sterling didn't rescue a damsel in distress. He recognized a warrior and gave her a bigger battlefield. Her story proves that true power isn't about the money in your bank account or the name on your building. It's about the strength of your convictions and the courage to stand up for what's right, especially when it's hard. What did you think of Clara's incredible journey? Have you ever faced a moment where you had to choose between what was easy and what was right? Share your thoughts and stories in the comments below. If this story inspired you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more true stories of courage and unexpected triumph. Thank you for watching.